Welcome back to another episode of the Pitcher Perfect podcast. I am thrilled to have a very important and very special guest today. My father, Gary Osterman, my catcher for probably 2/3 of my career, sitting on a bucket with me from day one up until basically I went to college. He is going to join us. I know you guys have heard me kind of talk about my upbringing and how important my practice, my mindset, all of that, and how I feel like I got that from my dad. So we're going to have him join, and hopefully some pitchers' moms and dads can learn a thing or two, because I think I hit the jackpot when it comes to pitcher parents. He did pitch with me a couple times. There are definitely stories of other pitchers' parents telling him he threw a good game too, because as I throw, he sits there and twitches with me. But, you know, he was along for the ride, and I think it's important. There are a lot of good things that, as I reflect on my career, came from my parents, but my dad specifically, since he was on the bucket and with me almost every practice and every lesson. So, Holly, I'm going to let you go ahead and start the deep dive.
Yeah, Gary, welcome. I can't be more excited to have you. I've heard so many good things about you, and I really think that as far as having the ability to pick anyone's brain as a parent, and I'm a mom, a softball mom too, so it's like I'm super excited to talk to you, because definitely for all of you guys out there watching, if you can see the way that Kat lights up when she talks about her dad, that clearly, you know, this journey they've been on together has been a really positive one, and she is a reflection of him, it sounds like, from everything that I have heard. So I'm super excited, and I really want to let's start at the beginning. How would you describe Kat as a kid?
She wasn't really all that athletic. She was, as many kids that you know are going to be very, very tall, she was really awkward. Didn't have a whole lot of strength, but we put her in sports, and she did okay, but never great. But she was pretty stubborn, opinionated, very emotional, get frustrated quite a bit. Didn't like losing. She was very competitive, kind of overly.
So what age are we talking that this really competitiveness started coming out?
Well, I guess it was, pretty young. 10 years old when she was playing soccer. She played soccer, Little League softball. We had a little neighborhood basketball team. So between all those sports, she was pretty much the same in all of them. She would have some meltdowns occasionally. Very, very emotional.
We have home video where I was supposed to be the point guard in YMCA basketball, and someone else took the ball down the court, and I stood there stomping my foot saying, "It's my job to take the ball down the court." And you hear my dad in the background saying, "Catherine, just run down the court." He's not off base. It started really young.
So when did you realize that softball was like the sport for her? She was in other sports. Did you ever think like basketball was going to be her thing, really, or soccer, or was it always softball that you thought kind of clicked a little bit earlier for her?
Again, she wasn't all that athletic, so I wasn't sure anything was going to be her thing at the younger ages. I mean, you just got to, tall people. Tall people know that when you're very, very young, you can be very uncoordinated. Your strength doesn't match your arms and hands and feet.
Yeah.
So I never was sure she was going to be anything. We were just trying to, put her in sports for all the other benefits of being in sports. Learn to play with other people and just to have a hobby and all those type of things. So softball was just another sport we were going to play. Now, we thought she was going to be tall, so we did have her go to basketball camps at a young age. My big brother was a basketball coach here in San Antonio, so we used to send her to his basketball camps that he worked for a number of years before she even during the softball time frame. So it was just another sport at first.
So, and then eventually things started to click for her with softball, with pitching. At what age did that happen, or did you start to think like, wow, she was really special here?
Really, it was pretty late it wasn't early on, even though she had some success early on. It never really clicked. She got some skills. I mean, she could make the ball spin, and I did see that there was something natural in the way she could hit her spots. One thing in the driveway when she's playing around, but when she got into a game, it was like everything went from 3 feet to 2 feet to where she was hitting. So I could see some things there, but I started, this softball pitching became my hobby as well. So I would go look at other pitchers, accomplished pitchers in the Houston area, and just see what they were doing and seeing how they were doing it and watching their ball spin and so on and so forth. And then it kind of, my first thought, I remember maybe 14, I go, you make the ball spin better than they do. Your ball spins. But at 14, she was really weak. She wasn't really strong. She was only 5'6", 5'7", something like that at that point. But I could see that, she had the skills. That part was there. Never knew if she would have the power or the athletic ability. So that was the first time.
Let's back up just a minute. You said, obviously we talked, I was a multi-sport athlete for a long time. And I came to you guys wanting to leave soccer, where I was a goalie and good at that, but it didn't drive me. Obviously, I got bored with it. But we didn't just go play Little League. I then eventually told you I wanted pitching lessons for my 11th birthday. When I said I wanted pitching lessons, do you remember at all? Obviously, you probably don't remember your initial thoughts, but did you think this was just going to be another, we're going to try it and go back to something? Or what were your thoughts when I was like, okay, I want to try pitching?
I really liked the idea that she wanted to pitch, because in my youth sports, I really enjoyed pitching probably the best of anything in my sports. And so I thought, if she had the same enjoyment in sports that I did, even though I didn't take it very far at all, but I sure enjoyed it when I did. That's all I cared about. That she would be able to get out there and pitch for a few years and kind of learn and enjoy it. And that was kind of fun. I thought that'd be a great experience for her. I didn't know how far she would take it, but I figured she would. I did think she would take it, get to a certain level of accomplishments to where she could enjoy it, at least.
I love how you mentioned that you would go out and just kind of learn and watch other pitchers. Had you had any previous softball background or been around the sport at all, or did your approach just kind of come as, what went into your approach with the way that you ultimately helped shape her journey?
Well, no, I didn't have any softball experience. Fast pitch softball was very important in Southern Illinois, from my little hometown. It would be in the paper, but other than that, I didn't have any experience with it at all. I just, I learned it along with her when she had pitching lesson. I would learn it along with her, and then I guess my background, I wanted to be a good golfer at one time in my career. So I still want to be a good golfer, but I want to be a good golfer, and so in my mind, mechanics were very, very important. So it was a lot of fun for me to see how they taught her mechanics, and then also to help her develop those. And I was strict on her on keeping those mechanics. I would not let her go off base on what her pitching coaches told her how they told her to pitch.
And
let's talk a little bit about our practice routine, starting at an early age, because you talk about having pitching coaches, and you did go find me the best in the Houston area at the time, and then we obviously branched off with Bobby when Bobby left Tim, and he was also one of the best in the Houston area. But a couple of things that I remember. One, we had the rule, at least for the longest time, especially early, if I didn't practice at home, you weren't going to pay for my lesson on Sundays. And the other piece of that early on was I also, and people don't believe me, so you can confirm this, I pitched with you and we practiced for almost a year prior to ever throwing in a game.
Yes, that's true.
When you told me I had to practice in order to get a lesson, what were you trying to instill in me? And at the same time, what was your goal as far as number of days out of the week at that point? And again, we're talking when I'm 10 and 11.
Well, the day after a pitching lesson's obvious. If you're learning something new, the next day you need to do it again. You don't want time off from that. So that's pretty obvious. But before, I just remember playing sports as a youth, and it's back to golf. There were times that I'd be playing golf, and I'd play every day for 5 or 6 days, and I'd be really good, and then I'd lay off one day, and then I'd come back, and it's like I never played before. Or play basketball, and you lay off a day, and then you get the ball, and you take a jump shot, and it's like, holy cow, I'm too strong on this jump shot. So that was the reasoning for being in the day before, because you wanted to be a little tired, or you wanted to be a little, you want your mind to be filled with what you were working on.
So how many days a week would she have to practice for her to be able to get her lesson? And is that something that you would recommend? What would you recommend to new parents or parents that are in this journey with their daughter as to how much work that they should be really encouraging their pitchers to be putting in on their own.
It was usually like 3 to 4 days a week.
I think it's 4 to 5 days a week mostly. But I will tell you what we did that I think was different is that one of those days may be only 10 or 15 minutes. These weren't full workouts. These were just enough to keep you a little, keep you tired, keep your timing.
Yeah.
But what made it to where she didn't practice, she didn't get the lessons was, as a kid, I think me and my brother both, we had piano lessons and we hated it. And Mom kept making us go, but we would never practice. So I was not going to pay for piano lessons without her working at it. That's where that came from. So.
Yeah, I think the piece about practice too is like the older that I got, we still kept it anywhere from 3 to 5. Did we go 6 days a week? There were a few random times that we had to, or because games were in there, we did something 6 days a week. But it varied, and you and I have talked about it, but it varied based on the time of the year and what else I had going on. So during the basketball season, which is slow softball time because we're talking into November, December, January, my pitching would be maybe every other day, and maybe we'd go 2 days in a row because I might take a day off somewhere because of a basketball game or a late practice. And so he was very instrumental in that, and we communicated based on, if my basketball game wiped me out, then maybe we did take 2 days off in a row, even though that was kind of our baseline. Was we didn't usually like to take 2 days off in a row because then you come back with the wild arm and everything feels loosey-goosey and you have to get back into your rhythm of like your body knowing how to pitch. But occasionally we would do 2 days in a row, but we would never, like, unless we were on a break and that was like a week to 2 week break, like I never took 3 days off in a row. But I think that was the big piece that he was instrumental in too, was figuring out with the ebbs and flows of travel ball season, okay, where are the times, like in the winter, we would work on things, but not 5-6 days a week. Like I might work on a new pitch and we'll throw half an hour of all my stuff and like get it under wraps and then 10 minutes of a new pitch. Or, if we're working on spotting something in a different spot than normal, like it was before or after 10 minutes of the practice would be our new thing, and then we would go into our practice. But I think sometimes people want this end-all be-all, like you have to throw 5 days a week for an hour every day, and it doesn't have to be that. There were many times, and I benefited from him working really close to the house to where I could become like, hey, can we get, I knew it was a short day. It was 30 minutes. Hey, can you come home? Let's throw for 30 minutes. I want to go to the boys basketball game, or I want to go to this with my friends tonight. And he'd come home because it's a short stint, 30 minutes. We'd get it done, and he may go back to work for another couple hours or whatever. And not everyone has that luxury, but we were able to know that, like, okay. And he would say sometimes when I would talk about things, okay, you need to throw tonight. I'd be like, okay, how do I get this? Like, how do I get this in and where? And, sometimes he'd be like, it needs to be a long one tonight. And, okay, then I need to say no and sacrifice something else because of the goals we had. So I think that was the cool piece I look back at now, that in the time you don't realize, but just how we structured the schedule based on, yes, you're throwing 3 times a week when you're also playing travel ball tournaments. So that's 6 days out of the week usually. But in the winter, that's not necessary if you're doing other sports. And it may not even be necessary even if you're not, because you need to allow your body to have some rest.
Right.
The fun story we have is I went to my first 18U tryout with the Cruisers, who I ended up finishing my career with in travel ball. But I hadn't thrown for like 2.5 weeks because after our nationals, 16U nationals, he was like, you're done, you're shut down. And then we found out all the dates for the 18U teams, and we were like, well, we'll just fly by the seat of our pants and go. And so I hadn't even thrown for almost 2 weeks prior to that, but it was important to shut down.
Yeah.
I think sometimes parents don't always keep that in the front of their mind.
Yeah. I do think that's definitely something that's tough with the seasons. I'm seeing all these people posting about tryouts, and I'm like, we just got back from Indiana. Like it's crazy. Like the breaks are getting smaller and smaller, I think. But it's crazy how it just, and if you don't, then, these other organizations are grabbing all the players like while you're on break. So I think it's tough. It makes it a tough thing definitely for the athletes to be able to take some downtime. But so to talk about travel ball, speaking of travel ball, so Gary, you obviously coached Kat growing up young, and you were the biggest part of her development. But when she really got into competitive travel ball and you took on the role as pitcher's dad in the stands, like how were you able, she's mentioned before that she feels you did a really good job about kind of knowing when to step in, when to step back, as a parent. But was that something that came naturally for you, or can you talk a little bit about that journey and knowing, like, kind of when to step in and when to take a step back as a parent?
Well, you kind of knew that someday I'd have to step back. So when she went to the Cruisers, I was one of the dads that would help with the team, but I wasn't one of the coaches, and I didn't really want to be one of the coaches. I made sure people knew that, and that was to try to transition away from being a dad coaching to being a dad in the stands. But with the Cruisers, or with the I was still her day-to-day pitching coach at home, just not on the field. And then
Right.
we still talked all the time, so it didn't seem like very very hard a transition at all. And then of course I talked to the coaches all the time, so I wasn't the coach, but I was still somewhat involved. But I knew that day was coming. Then when she went to, I guess you were with the USA team before, that helped a little bit. And then, I didn't even go to some of those games when she was with USA. And then, so I got to get away from her, or get away from being a daddy coach on there. But we still talked all the time. And then I can still remember one of the things that the University of Texas tells all the parents of all the athletes that come in, and it was really stressed, is that you need to, and this, I give credit to University of Texas on this, but they said that you have to teach your kid how to handle the situations. You can't handle it. So if there's a problem, always it's the child. So it was it wasn't hard for me to stay away. If there was any problems she had, it was for her to solve it, not me. I only think I talked to Coach Clark there at Texas one time, and that was on an injury. It had anything to do with pitching or anything. So.
Right.
Yeah, I think you did the transition to college better than, a lot of parents I see, and it's just but I think the other piece is, obviously I stayed close enough to home so you could come to most of the games. And there's a story, he almost didn't come to my first tournament, and then at the last second, he kind of was like, okay, I got to book a flight. Like, I can't miss it. And thankfully he didn't, because it was the worst tournament of my college career. And had he not been there, I don't know what I would have done, because there's one point UCLA literally, and I'm not exaggerating, singles me to death to a run rule. I get pulled and I'm like just about to lose it. And I'm, of course, do the walk to, like, I got to go to the bathroom kind of thing. And he's walking behind. He doesn't come up and console me, like where everyone's like, oh, she went crying to her dad. He followed like behind me just within earshot and was like, you're going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Like, go. And he kind of waited till I got out of the bathroom, and then he did the same thing on the way back to the dugout. And if he hadn't been there, I don't know what I would have done. But I still think you made the transition from high school and travel ball to college in the aspect that you are my day-to-day coach. And very rarely, I go to games and I hear a pitcher's dad still yelling things at them, or what pitch they should be throwing, or, what are we doing, those kind of things. And I think you transitioned into college, and maybe it was the USA piece that helped, but with, like, literally able to shut that part of you off.
Yeah. It wasn't an issue for me, because it was, I don't know, I just realized that college and softball was meant for her to develop as a person. The goal wasn't for her to develop into an Olympic player. At that point, it was more of, you got to develop into a person, so you got to do this on your own. I didn't have anybody to help me in college with my grades or classes or anything like that. That's kind of the way I wanted to be hands-off as much as I could.
So what advice would you give to parents that are maybe in that transitional point and having a really hard time letting go or trusting their daughter to be coached by other people? I think that's a very common one sometimes, that, when you are such a big pivotal part of your athlete's journey, that sometimes it's hard to also give over some trust to others and to other coaches. But what advice would you give to parents that are struggling and having a hard time with that?
I think the key thing is, again, look at the long-term view of what your daughter may be pitching in college, but this may be the end of it. So you want your daughter to develop and learn skills to how to interact with their coach and their teammates and everything else. So when they get a job, they can do the same thing at their job, at their work. That's what the real goal is. It's not necessarily, for us it was different a little bit, but your goal isn't for your daughter to be a national team pitcher. It's probably not going to happen. So we just remember what the real meaning of being a college athlete is.
Did you ever, in your wildest dreams, think that your daughter would be an Olympic medalist?
we didn't. It was apparent to other people than it was us. I think as she was developing here in Texas, we didn't play a lot of national tournaments until she was 15, and so I think we all thought that there was a bunch of, we used to say it, a bunch of Michelle Smiths out in California, and that we weren't really that good yet. So that's what we thought. And then when she got to, I guess when she was 15 at nationals, that was the first time we realized, wow, I mean, she's standing out here. And then right after that, she grew, and as good as she was at 15 at nationals, everything went up exponentially with her strength and her length, you know. So, and then I guess when we went up against the Olympic team, that's when we realized that, yeah, I mean, when I saw the Olympic players flinch when she threw a curveball or look at a rise ball and couldn't believe it, that's when I realized there's something special here. This isn't common, but we really didn't know that till then.
So we played the national team in 2000 on their Central Park to Sydney tour. And actually, as we're recording this, it was yesterday. So what's today, the 30th?
Yeah.
It was on the July 29th, 25 years ago, was when we played the national team. Wow. And I threw 5 innings, gave up 1 hit, and struck out 11.
And so you were?
I was 17.
17,
yeah. It's 2020. Yeah, I can't believe it's 2025. That's not right. Awful, but time flies. Wow.
Yeah, so I was 17, and in the middle of my recruiting, Stanford was there in Dallas to watch this game. We did my home visit at a restaurant there in Dallas. Obviously, recruiting was pushed back then, but I was about to say, which game or what moment was it where your eyes kind of were like, okay, this is possible?
That's when it was possible. That's when I noticed it was. That was it. It was like almost a double-edged sword at that point. It was like, yes, this is possible. It's game on, and you got to be ready in 2 years. You can't be ready in 4. I mean, there's no doubt you're going to be ready in 4, but you got to be ready in 2 because that's when they selected. So. So it was a lot of pressure. It hit me pressure-wise too. That she had to develop in 2 years.
So how did you and your family really help Kat stay grounded when the game started to really? Seems like it got big pretty fast at one point later in her career. That it went from one day, not really realizing how great she was, to all of a sudden that there's this Olympic option in front of her. That how do you manage that it seems like that's something that would be difficult to kind of maintain the good perspective that it seems you've always had?
Well, my wife and I, we talked a lot about keeping her grounded, period. I mean, that was our goal. So as parents, so we didn't want her to be just a sports person necessarily. So that part was always ingrained in us. But I think once we kind of both realized that with the Olympic gold, it was easy to be grounded because that was the goal. The goal was the Olympics. I mean, people don't realize it. I almost felt sorry for her, like her freshman and sophomore year in college, because she didn't get to enjoy it as much as others because she was trying out for the Olympics every game. They were going to try to find ways that a 18-year-old wasn't going to be on the team. That was my opinion.
Yeah.
So it was like it was a tryout every time. And I can remember one time where she threw a no-hitter to Baylor, I think. She called me up and says, yeah, I threw a no-hitter, but 2 balls got away from me. They hit two fly balls. And so that was kind of made me think, God, you can't enjoy a no-hitter because you're trying out for the Olympics, for the Olympic team. So that's kind of how it was. So it was easy to keep her grounded because that was the focus those first 2 years.
Well, I think the other thing that helped, and he touched on it, was like we didn't play in the national, like 14U, I wasn't playing in nationals in Indiana like some are right now, right? Mm-hmm. So they're not playing, I wasn't playing the Bat Busters until I was 16 and 17. I wasn't playing whoever, the A's and the Choppers and Great Bets and everybody who was out there in California. So we didn't know, but I see parents now and like Susie is the best thing since sliced bread. Like, they have nothing to compare it to. They just know she's the best thing. Mm-hmm. Regardless of what I did, I'm not going to say it was never good enough. It was good. He would acknowledge it was good, but he'd always but we can be better. So it was like, good job, but here's where we can improve. Kind of, which is probably why I called after a no-hitter and was like, yeah, but 2 fly balls went deep and it's not okay. Is there was always a perspective of how can we be a little bit better. And so I think that mentality is what kind of kept me to being able to, and I enjoyed my freshman, sophomore year, don't listen to him. I mean, I did I didn't go out and do the whole college thing because I had the Olympic carrot, and I think I've touched on that with you a little bit, is like, you know, the weekends I was going to pitch on Saturday or Sunday because I wasn't going to take off 2 days in a row, and to convince a catcher to come on a weekend when they don't have to is not easy. So sometimes it was me in the net, and it wasn't even a 9-hole. It was just a big old catch net. I needed your range rings back then.
You know.
But I think it was easy to keep a perspective in college, like you said, because I had the carrot dangling in front of me, but also because I had always grown up with what you did was great. Okay, what did we learn from it? And you and I talked about that in our episode on failure. Is like, you can learn from the failure, but you can also learn when you look at a successful game. What did you do well? Where, you know, did you walk somebody? Did you have back-to-back walks? Like, what happened here? And that was kind of always a mindset. And that would be one of my last questions for you is post-games, and I talked to you about it before we came on air. I don't have very many memories of terrible car rides. In fact, I have memories of stopping at the gas station and getting cherry Coke and chili cheese Fritos, and then we would hit the road and talk about what happened. Such a great diet for a young athlete. But talk about how you handled both as my coach and then even when the games, cruisers and beyond, when you weren't my coach anymore. Like your mentality going into our car rides, because there were very few where I think tears were shed because I was getting in trouble. And I say again, trouble because of how I handled failure, not because I actually failed. But what was your mindset when we got into car rides and those conversations we had?
Well, first of all, you did a pretty good job most of the times. That part, I think that's the engineer in me. I was watching her mechanics. I was watching the ball move. I was seeing where she missed her spots, you know, and also knew that she was going to miss her spots at times and through bad pitches. The engineer in me was trying to get data to make her better the next time, and I didn't really care whether. I mean, I wanted her to do well. Don't get me wrong, but I just, you know, as long as I don't think she would ever. In my mind, I don't believe I would have said anything unless she didn't give the effort. But when she stepped in the circle, she was so competitive. I mean, she was too hard on herself. She didn't need me for that. She needed me for the other stuff. Or did you hit your spots? Was the ball moving? How was your mechanics? And that was my job and kind of as an engineer. That was my natural thing.
And that leads into, if you're a regular listener, you've heard me talk about my game against the Hanning Batbusters and how we lost 1-0 in extra innings. And my first words while I'm crying to him because we just lost this intense game that, again, doesn't define the rest of my career, but in the moment, it was the first time we were getting to play against essentially the best team in the country. And as he said, I'm super competitive, so I really, really wanted to win. But my first words were, I need another pitch. And his words back were, you're not wrong, but what you just did was really good. You didn't lose that game. It just unfolded the way it did. And I think that's where he talks about, people are always asked how hard he was on me. And I'm like, I never felt like leaving a game that I was going to have my dad not talk to me, be mad at me. That never crossed my mind. I actually probably feared some in practice. Like if I was tired from basketball or I just had a bad day and I was in a mood, like if I didn't turn it on and go all out in practice, then I was going to get it. The intensity and the focus and the purposeness of practice was more of where he was hard on me than he was like, hey, you have to go execute to perfection. I did that on my own with that standard. But I think the Batbuster game that I've talked about is like the prime example of how he handling me post game, because it was almost always like that. Now, as I got older and I called him after pro games, the conversation, you missed this and this didn't look right. And I'm like, okay, cool, thanks. I'm going to go now.
Now that you can watch all the games on TV and really break it down, so, I mean, you got a lot more information in front of your eyes to be able to analyze there from an engineering standpoint.
That Batbusters game, what I was really happy about is that I sat and watched that game, and I think the last inning, she kept getting 2 strikes on people. She was throwing a rise ball, and in those days, she had a really good rise ball. I mean, she could tell people she was going to throw it, and it didn't matter, you know. But they were fouling them off, or they'd lay off of them, or this or that. And so I came to the conclusion, it's time for another pitch. It's time to let go. And so I had that conclusion, and I was trying to figure out in my mind, how am I going to say this? And then she said it before I could even say anything. I wasn't going to say anything then. I was going to say it 2 days later. But she said it, and I went, oh, game on. Here we go. here we go. And so we did. We started working. We went with Bobby Smith. We went to Bobby and said, it's time. Let's work on that peel drop and let's go.
So right now, I think in the sport, there is this focus on speed, speed, speed. So where would you rank speed in terms of speed, spots, or spin? How important is speed as a component to success, and how much did you put that onto Kat? Was that ever a focus for you?
It was no. Well, I'll tell you a story. We're going to a pitching lesson, and it's inside a gym somewhere, I think in Bel Air, Texas. We're in a gym there, and she's throwing, and she's thinking she's throwing hard. I'm throwing 55, Dad. Throwing 55. And so they put her on the radar gun, and I think she was 52. And again, we go back to the emotional part. Get frustrated. She got frustrated and down. So she might have been 13 then. I don't think I let her get on a radar gun again until 15 years old. So we never, ever stressed speed. My feeling on that was, speed's going to come from good mechanics. You're going to be throwing, in those days, you're going to throw 2 or 3 games a day. So you're going to be tired anyway. So why work on speed? Let's work. It was all on mechanics, release points, spin. That's what we worked on all the time. Spin all the time. So,
yeah, I love that. I think that is a great message that everybody needs to hear.
I think the first time I got on a radar gun after that, and I remember that because they kept the radar gun and I kept trying to throw harder and harder. And Holly, the harder you try to throw, you don't.
Yeah.
And so finally I was like, just get rid of it. But then I went to a USF camp. And I think that's the next time I got on a radar gun, because we had made a bet that didn't come to fruition. But if he was like, well, if you hit 60 on that radar gun, you can have a car when you turn 16. And I was like, game on. And I got 58. No, we definitely spin always as fast as I could spin it is what he wanted to see. And God help me, thank God there weren't these diamond kinetics and all this other stuff that does spin rate. Otherwise he would have been all over the spin rate piece of any technology these days. But it was that and spots. And I think, we've talked about it too. I think some of what made me appear to be faster, and I never appeared to be very fast, but what made me appear to be faster was that my spin was so tight. So the ball goes and you hear the spin going, and there's a different vision, a view of a pitch that's spinning fast and a pitch that's spinning slow. So that was definitely to my advantage.
And then the direction of spin too. First, we used to put the line on the ball, and I think this is somewhat luck, but for some reason, the way she threw the ball, she could truly do pure spin. I mean, she could make a rise ball, go back. It was hard, but she could do it. It wasn't optimal, but she could do it. And she could make her curve ball be flat. She could make her drop ball straight up and down. So it was measurable. She'd throw the ball, and if you didn't just see that line, instant feedback,
right.
And then she'd just keep working until she got it. So that was a plus. I think was kind of lucky.
And you guys use that line ball all the time, correct?
All the time.
I warmed up with it before games, and then doing drills in the first part of my full pitch, and then I would switch to a game ball.
Yeah, I love that. I think that instant feedback, without going too in depth with information and all the analytics sometimes that we can get lost in, but having simple instant feedback like that it's perfect. It's just enough to let you know what your pitch is doing without overwhelming you with too much data. But yeah, I think that's definitely something we actually haven't mentioned in a while. We mentioned it in one of our first episodes, and so all you pitchers out there, I hope since you watched that, it might have been episode 1 or 2, but I hope you've been lining your softballs and working on your spin, definitely. Well, I have one more question. I don't know if you have any questions, and then I would like to play a little game with you guys, or have Kat kind of do a little trivia type thing with you. But my last question would be, and you don't have to get super in depth into it, but knowing everything you know now, obviously in hindsight's 2020, is there anything that you would change or do different as a parent at all with Kat's journey through softball?
I don't think so. I think we had pretty much a storybook.
Sounds like it.
Softball journey. So there's some stuff I wish there's a couple of things I maybe would have gotten involved. I'd like to have gotten involved with later in her career, but there were some coaches changing the way she pitched and stuff, and I never really said it, but I had my own. I thought I didn't like some of the changes that were being made. So, but other than that, really.
All right, you got the goat of pitching and the goat of parenting, a pitcher over here. So, all the information for you parents watching, heed the advice. There's some gold nuggets I think that were dropped today, definitely. But if you would like, Kat, to do a little kind of quiz or trivia with your dad, I think it would be
we're
fun.
gonna just do like hot seat, just quick fire answers.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so my best pitch.
Your rise ball at 17, 18.
I can still throw a really good rise ball, just for the record. Dinosaur. Oh, Holly, I never sent you my numbers, did I?
Yeah, you did. I saw.
Will tell you that the rise ball still is elite, and I didn't throw it enough.
But there were a couple years there. The drop ball that ended as a strike. Some of those were just. I mean, I can remember in Oklahoma City the first time you throw a drop ball, you hear the murmur through the crowd. That's how much it broke, and that was the big stadium. So
yeah,
I can remember that. So
yeah. Okay. Favorite road trip for softball, or let's go most memorable road trip for softball.
Yeah, there's so many. So many. Remember Novi, Michigan, up there for that. Some Louisiana tournament. Remember that one?
Yeah, that one. That's a whole story in of itself.
Of course, the Colorado tournament. Some of the Canada Cups were. And when she was young, she went and played for the Sunbirds, and she was scared to get out of the dugout. Those were women. And she was.
Was it open division, right?
That was a culture shock. That I learned a little something on that. I don't think that was too good of parenting, but.
Sorry. I remember we drove to Colorado one time, and we stopped in Carlsbad Caverns to kind of sightsee with my brothers. We had to get a pitching workout in because you can't take off more than 2 days in a row. So we literally found like a field on the side of the road. My mom dropped him and I off and took my brothers to the movies, and then came back and got us later. So that's my most memorable. Best game that I threw.
The Olympic team game in 2000. A lot of good games. I don't know, but that one. The national championship when you beat the Bat Busters in St. Louis. What else? I don't know. There's just a lot of them. Very good. I don't know.
Yeah, Japan in 2004.
Yeah.
That's probably my favorite.
Yeah.
You weren't there in, was it 06 when we had to qualify for the Olympics in China, and I had to beat Australia and Japan back to back. And both of those games were incredible, but they weren't there, and I don't think they were on internet or streaming.
They weren't.
All right. If I could have gone to any other school, where would you have wanted me to go?
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh man,
I just pulled that one out of thin air.
The Stanford offer was pretty good.
I kind of figured that was coming.
I don't know anybody that turned that down, but you did.
But it worked out.
So same question for you, Kat. If you had gone to Texas.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, Stanford was my number 2, and it was more just that I had 2 brothers at home, and I was 2.5 hours from home at Texas, so I was far enough away from them to go live college life, but I was also close enough to go home when I needed to, or to have them come to games if needed. The 3.5 hour flight just didn't. Back then, it wasn't as easy to just jump on a plane like it is now. So maybe, I don't want to say fear, but there might have been a little fear going that far from home for me. So Stanford was my number 2. I did talk to Coach Inquist at UCLA for a long time and had really great conversations with her, and I finally just had to admit to myself and her that this girl from Texas couldn't just be plopped in the middle of LA and survive. Yeah. So I ended up, having the final conversation with her, and it was great. And she's still been a huge fan since I was done at Texas and enjoyed that with her. But yeah, Stanford probably would have been mine too. Although Washington was a close one in 3rd place. So.
But we didn't try to talk her out of it too much. I mean, Texas was pretty close. We get to see her play, and I always had that feeling that if you were a good athlete at University of Texas, people would know you all over the state, and they would help you in your future endeavors, and it's worked out that way. So
yeah, I think that would be my last question for you. What was the best advice? I think I know your answer. But the best advice you were given for the recruiting process?
I don't know. We didn't keep the recruiting process. We didn't keep very many schools on the string. We cut them down right away. Cut them down to 10, I think, or something like that. But I guess the big thing to me was don't go to school. Don't pick the school based on softball. Pick it on where would you want to go to school if you didn't have softball. And so that was, I guess, the number one thing. That was, before she got pretty good, we used to talk in the driveway, and we were hoping that she could walk on Texas and play.
Wow.
And maybe if you were a tall, lefty, they might let you walk on.
Wow.
And anyway, so yeah, that was it, I guess.
I think you said at one point, and I think Mr. Sorensen might have told it to you. And he said it at one point. He's like, "We're gonna let you be selfish unless it's about money and or like this you're going somewhere we absolutely can't get to see you ever," kind of thing. And it was more of if the scholarship piece or whatever didn't look like it was going to work out. But I remember he told me, it's like, it's your 4 years, so we're going to let you figure out what's important to you. And we had a pact that I wouldn't commit until I took all my visits. I did convince them to let me break that pact because I knew on my visit to Texas it's where I wanted to be, but I had to do a lot of convincing to them for that one. But we weighed all the pros and cons of everything, as you said, and really softball was not the driving factor for any of it. So I think that's pretty cool. But thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure.
We'll see if I have any questions for you. Maybe bring you back.
I would love to have you back, Gary. Thank you so much. It's just, you've been a pleasure, and I'm soaking it all in too. As I kind of mentioned, I have an 8-year-old that just started. She's going into her 3rd year of playing. So I appreciate all your insight. Like I said, we would love to have you back. And Kat, you want to close it out?
Yeah, thank you guys for joining us on this edition of the Pitcher Perfect podcast. Pitcher Perfect father here joined us today.
Really.
But as always, if you guys have questions, and feel free, if you have questions for this guy, we will bring him back on to answer them. So dads, moms, pitchers, all of it, questions, submit them to us. We will answer them. We'll bring him back on if he needs to answer. But thank you guys for joining us. Like, subscribe, share, all the things, and we will be back with another episode next week.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.